there is a limited time that we all have to be entertained. And so I think that, cinema is in a really challenging moment where I think they're struggling financially, but really to make that a special experience, to make people want to come to the cinema requires a series of as frictionless as possible moments. And right now, I think there is a lot of friction. It's a high cost. The experience of going to a movie is maybe not as special as it once was.
Michael, give us an overview of your incredibly interesting, exciting career so far.
Something that I've wanted to do since I was a teenager, actually, was inspired by video games and films and the things I was seeing, and got my first computer when I was 13, and sort of always wanted to do these sorts of things. And I've been very fortunate in that I started out as a video game programmer, and worked on a number of different games, and was then able to join Pixar relatively early on to work on animated features and to learn about the movie business, and then work on live action, visual effects, at a number of different places, and throughout all of that, and move on to theme parks, and then throughout all of that, to be able to bring technology to bear on creative pursuits. And so it's been an amazing journey to be able to put creative things into the world, and just be a part of these incredible teams.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about Pixar, but you're also with Disney.
I had an opportunity to join Disney's Imagineering group, which has this incredible legacy of creating theme parks and really inventing what a modern theme park looks like, and to then bring a very digital first approach to the tools and the technologies that Imagineers were using to design and build theme parks. Journey is this really interesting company. It's actually 6 different companies brought together, all with different specialties, but all with this kind of common goal of creating what we call multi-dimensional experiences. And that is to be able to tell stories and to bring new experiences to audiences across physical and digital and virtual, and the joining of those in these interesting new ways.
So given all that experience and what you've seen over the last few decades, do you think that we're in the middle of some kind of cultural industrial revolution?
Well, it's interesting. I think that we've been in this revolution. I think historians will look back and say that we've been in this for a long time. I think it started really with the advent of digital computers in the 40s and 50s, and has taken us through this very modern and incredible digital age. I think the advent of robotics as a common part of how businesses and people work and play, and now artificial intelligence, which actually has been around since the 50s and mirrors that digital revolution, is now having a moment. And I think we'll look back, and in that same way we look at industrial revolutions, and we're really talking about anywhere from 40 to 80 years of a transformation. I think we'll find that we were in the middle of it. I think when it comes to entertainment, which I've been around and across for most of my career, I think we'll find that where we started in terms of the ways that people were entertained and were engaged with storytelling has transformed incredibly. When we get to the part where maybe it isn't changing as much.
So do you think that theme parks can still compete with things like gaming or videos or streaming?
Yeah, I think that it's maybe not about whether they're competing with each other. I think there's a competition at the base level for attention and time and eyeballs. But I think actually what's interesting, and where Journey has really focused its time and energy, is the sort of the joining of these experiences, where they used to be you would go to a theme park, or you would listen to a piece of music, or you would experience a film or read a book. What you now have are these kind of worlds, these universes that create stories within them, but can connect the physical to the digital in ways that let people kind of be part of these worlds for more time and across different experiences.
So those worlds, does that mean that IP has become, in fact, the most valuable asset? You've got to have the right to own that world.
Yeah, I think it's really for businesses for sure. I think IP is a really important part of that story. I think that people want to be engaged. Humans are storytellers at heart, and connection is a big part of our worlds, and how we interact with people and how we interact with the world. So I think that finding that story, that world that people can connect to and want to be a part of, and want to form communities of their own on top of that, right? They get engaged with stories. They like to be told stories, and then they like to talk to other humans about the stories and their experience with it. I think that is kind of always been a strong part of being humans and storytelling, and now to connect those across these worlds is a really powerful force.
How has adaptability been important in your career across VFX and live events and so on?
I think adaptability is a strong quality to have no matter what you're doing. And I think for me, it's really been about, I've always been a generalist rather than a specialist. I mean, I started out as a computer scientist and a software engineer, and that was my specialty, but I very quickly wanted to go more broad. To be able to understand how what I was doing as a developer connected to everything else, and how the businesses I was in were connected. And I think that's really where I found my career has taken me, is to be a leader and to be able to help groups of people kind of connect for what they were doing day to day to the bigger picture, and to help businesses connect to what they were doing today and how they would connect into the future. And I think the adaptability, comes from wanting to understand that big picture and being able to move to know that everything that I was doing had this connection, and to understand where it connected, throughout.
Can you explain to me what a multi-dimensional experience means practically?
I think for us at Journey, I think that's really about being able to connect to audiences wherever they are. I think we talked about the challenges, the differences, the competition of theme parks versus other types of experiences. And I think for us, it's really about connecting to those audiences, whether they're physically in a space, whether they're online and in a digital environment, whether they're experiencing some sort of, an experience in a museum, or going to see a stage show that has a digital component. There's always these kind of connection points, and how you bring the physical and the digital together gives us that breadth of experience. And I think that kind of the richness and the depth and strengthens that connection. And so I think that's really important to us, and to sort of, it's not just that moment in time where people connect, but that they can take that experience home with them, if that makes sense, or they can experience again that world across these multiple touch points.
But do you think then that the overload of digital experience might be driving people back to the purely physical?
I think that we probably did reach some sort of, at least, kind of recent peak digital. I think we were already there, and then the pandemic came along and really forced us to be less physical in our interactions, or at least more narrow in them. And so I think for everyone, there's sort of a rebound where once we could get back out into the world, that we realized how valuable the physical experience, whereas we are physical creatures and we're wired to be physical. And there are entire generations, especially I think Gen Z and a little bit of Gen Alpha, where their formative years were happening in a world where they couldn't connect, where the rest of us we're sort of already used to years and years of that. But I do think that people came to appreciate the physical, but they haven't stopped being on their phones all the time. They haven't stopped playing games or experiencing films or shows. They really still have found these new digital experiences that have that they connect with emotionally. And so I think it's really, how do we connect those all together in a meaningful way, so it's not just one or the other.
So, I mean, when they're connected in a digital way, do you think that does ultimately damage something like traditional cinema? Where do you see the future of films?
I think that it is, we go back to that idea of competition, right? There is a limited time that we all have to be entertained. And so I think that, cinema is in a really challenging moment where I think they're struggling financially. But really, to make that a special experience, to make people want to come to the cinema, requires a series of as frictionless as possible moments. And right now, I think there is a lot of friction. It's a high cost. The experience is, the experience of going to a movie is maybe not as special as it once was. But I think there is a way to bring that back. It's just a question of whether that business, those businesses, that industry can afford to do that and quickly enough. But I do think people want something more than just sitting in a room and watching a screen. I think they want to be engaged in interesting new ways. And I think, video games have always been a way to be part of the story while still watching something on screen. And then when you can combine that kind of interactive and that immersion, but bring a physical element to it, I think it's going to be hard for them to go back to just sort of sitting in a big room watching a movie.
Yeah.
But I still think that there are moments where movies move people, and I don't think cinema will go away forever in the same way that many forms of what were the kind of the height of entertainment at the time, right? The theater, opera, ballet, reading books even, right, have not disappeared, but have sort of taken their place alongside these other forms of entertainment.
Yeah. Now, as you said, AI has been around since the 1950s in various guises, but it is now everywhere. And there is an argument that says that it's making, yes, everything faster, but also blander, cheaper, certainly, but just not as great.
I think there's a risk of that for sure. Even in sort of the more mundane, if businesses are all turning to the same AI engines to generate the things that they're generating with it, there's a risk that it's harder to stand out, and you'll save money and maybe time in the short term, but you'll miss out on what makes, companies and people unique. I think when it comes to creativity, I think there's a real risk there that what the engines have created today is the ability to sort of almost summarize or average out what the inputs are, right? You can scrape the internet of all the art that's out there and then create the idea of something new, but it's really not creation in the human sense of it. For me, I think the real value is to create AI engines that solve the problems that get us to those solutions without ruining the human element of it. The things that technology have always been good at, which is automating the mundane, finding ways to do things more quickly where it's sort of drudgery or repetitive, but not creative. And I think that if we focus on that and focus on the sort of the true cost of AI, which is a financial cost that's been a bit distorted. There's an environmental impact, which is hard to bring to the forefront. I think really with AI, there's a chance to make things better, but not lose that human element. But there's absolutely a risk today that we're headed towards a path where AI has taken over, and we've lost some of what makes entertainment and creativity special.
And finally, do you think that there's one question in your industry that people should be asking and aren't?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is to make sure that we're asking, what our core values are and why we're doing what we're doing. There's always going to be in a commercial venture a need to make money and to survive. But I think it is important to understand why we're trying to do these things. Why is entertainment so important, right? And why is so much of it so important? And why do humans love to be storytellers or to be told stories to, and to make sure that we're really orienting ourselves toward that. And I think that engagement, that connection is really the heart of what we do. And I think that if we continue to ask ourselves that question, we'll continue to sort of advance and to tell great stories and to give people some real value in the time that they're, giving to us.
Fantastic. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.